So you're thinking about building a brand new home. Well, let me be honest. Not all builders are created equal. Some are cutting corners, using cheap materials, and rushing the job, all at your expense. I've walked through homes where the dream house turned into a nightmare just months, if not a year, sometimes a few years after closing. So today I'm sharing with you 10 red flags to spot bad builders and poor workmanship before you sign that contract. And be sure to stick with me to the end because I'll give you 2 expert tips to make sure that your new home is worth every penny. What's going on, family? I am Sir Ashley, your trusted new construction expert in North and South Carolina. I am a real estate advisor. I've been helping people for over the past decade, and I've helped thousands of people move to and within the greater Charlotte area. So if you're interested in the Carolinas or interested in buying a home, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel because that's what we talk about. All right, now it's time for me to save you some time, stress, and money. Let's get into it. Number 1 on the list is a distracted or arrogant sales agent. Now, your first interaction with the builder is most likely through the salesperson in the model home. And you've heard the saying, first impressions mean everything. And you heard the saying, first impressions go a long way. Here's what you should watch out for. Is that salesperson attentive and transparent? Or are they dodging your questions and rushing you through the process? I've had a client who asked to walk through a home under construction, and the salesperson flat out refused, saying it's unsafe. Spoiler alert, it may sound like they were just doing their job, but I walked through that home and it was not unsafe. You see, I believe that salesperson was hiding the shoddy framing work and the unorganized job site. A good builder has nothing to hide. Now please, sometimes that reasoning or excuse of it's not safe is legitimate, but sometimes it is them evading and not letting you see behind the curtain. Here's the pro tip. Ask hard questions. The sales rep gets defensive or evasive, dig deeper. That's when you double down into the builder's reputation. Now, when you do research on a builder's reputation, yes, you can Google it and look at Better Business Bureau and everything, but what I like to do is to go on Reddit forums and then also talk to people in the area, in the community, whether it is coworkers, colleagues, because every builder has a different reputation in certain areas of the country. Some builder here in the Carolinas may build an excellent product, but in California, their work may be shoddy. So me looking at online reviews and seeing reviews from somebody that bought in California is not quite pertinent for me if they're building a home or if I'm buying a home here in the Carolinas. But let's move on to number 2. When you go in, the first impression is typically the salesperson. The second impression is the model home. If the model home isn't impressive, that is a red flag. Let's start with the basics. The model home is supposed to showcase, highlight the builder's work. It's where they put their best effort and best foot forward. And typically, most builders give you the most expensive upgrades in the model home to make you fall in love with the floor plan in the home and the builder. But here's the problem. I once walked into a model home and noticed uneven paint lines where the walls met the ceilings. Now, most people would have been like, oh, nothing really to be concerned about. But again, this is their crown jewel. This is how they're supposed to be impressing the community and the public as a whole by showing them the model home. I went to another builder, went through the model home, and I already saw cracks in the framing and the door frames, the window frames, and then even at the baseboards. Now that was pretty alarming because I know that they just built this model home. And typically, homes move, homes settle, but it takes about a year to start seeing those things because a home expands and contracts depending on the season. But the fact that you had these defects so early on caused me concern and really just put red flags in my mind concerning this builder and the different corners they may be cutting. So here's what you can do. Inspect everything. Look at the flooring, the baseboards, the corners. If the model home isn't top notch, this is a major red flag because, again, they're supposed to be putting their best foot forward in a model home to get people wanting to buy. And if they can't do the model home correctly, what do you think they're going to do in the construction of your home? Now, real quick, before we move on to number 3, if you're getting any value out of this video, be sure to like it and subscribe to the channel because it greatly helps me grow on YouTube. Now let's move on to number 3. Number 3, the third red flag you need to look out for is uneven framing and poor lumber quality. Now, let's talk about the skeleton of your home, the framing. When you walk through a house at this stage, always with permission. Now, this is where we talk about a home being unsafe when you go walk through a home. During the framing process, a home could be very unsafe because the framing could be unstable and it's typically buttressed up by a couple more extra 2x4s. So yes, it is unsafe. So only go through the home when it's in the staging process with permission and with a hard hat. Now, when you go through a home at this stage, the framing stage, you're getting a behind the scenes look at what most buyers miss. I once toured a home with a client and we noticed that the studs were slightly crooked. Now, that is not uncommon because before they hang the drywall, the contractor can straighten it out, but this was quite excessive. It was just about every other stud, and that's not an exaggeration. And why did that catch my eye? Because the builder in this instance was using low quality lumber and it warped because it wasn't stored properly on site. You see, when the studs or when the framing gets delivered, it's typically open to the elements. And depending on where you are in the country, it could be susceptible to rain, which in the Carolinas during this time, it rains a lot, snow, extreme heat, and that has an impact on the lumber. And if the builder is already using poor lumber, that degrades that lumber even further. Poor framing compromises the entire structure of the home. Now, if you're buying a home and it has this drywall up and you weren't able to see the studs or what's behind the drywall, here's what you should look out for. You should look out for crooked walls, gaps where studs meet joints, excessive filler pieces, the shims. If the framing is bad, everything after that, like drywall and cabinets, will be a mess and will be a little off. The fourth red flag is sloppy flooring, trim, and molding. This is where poor workmanship becomes painfully obvious. Uneven flooring, gaps between planks, and poorly cut trims all scream rush job. And sometimes it may not even be a rush job. It could just be an inexperienced worker working on your house. Let me tell you a story about a client buying a new home, only to find out their laminate flooring started to lift in certain areas within weeks. Why? Because the subfloor wasn't prepped properly. And if you've ever been in a home upstairs where you hear popping on the carpet, that's because the subfloor either wasn't prepped properly or wasn't nailed down properly. That's why you hear that little give in the floor, especially in new construction homes. This is what you should check out for. You should see if the tiles or planks are misaligned. And do the baseboards, I'm looking down at baseboards right now, do they have gaps? You also have to ask yourself, are the nail holes visible and unfilled? Builders who care about quality will take the time to get these details right. Moving on to number 5, patchy or sloppy paintwork. Paint is one of those things you might overlook, but it is a major indicator of carelessness. I've seen homes where the paint had drips and streaks and even bubbles. You see, those are signs that the builder rushed to finish or skipped proper prep work. Now, I have heard horror stories about people buying a home only to notice paint peeling after just a few months. Now, I can say that has not happened with any of my clients, but I have heard horror stories of it happening in certain communities with certain builders. And that happens because the builder hadn't sanded or primed the drywall correctly, so the paint had no chance of sticking. Here's what you should do. Check for even coverage. Clean lines at edges, no drips, and if the paint looks bad, it's not just cosmetic. Point it out so they can fix it, because the person that did it the first time either rushed or did a careless job. Now, the next red flag you need to be looking out for is the misalignment of doors and windows. Now, this one is a big deal. If doors and windows don't open smoothly or have gaps, you are in trouble. Misalignment means poor insulation, structural issues, energy loss. You see, if the door can't close properly, if the window can't close properly, you're losing heat, you're losing energy, and that's going to cause your utility bills to go up. I once inspected a home where the front door had a noticeable gap at the bottom, big enough for bugs to crawl through. Turns out the frame wasn't square. Check this. Open and close every door and window. Look for gaps, sticking frames, or loose hardware. And if it's wrong now, it will only get worse over time. Do not turn a blind eye to these little things. Now, the seventh red flag you need to be aware of is foundation cracks or settling issues. You see, the foundation is literally the backbone of your home. Now, small hairline cracks, that's normal. Concrete does two things. It hardens and it cracks. That's normal. But large horizontal or diagonal cracks is a major red flag. See, I once walked a home where the foundation had deep cracks and water stains. The soil had not been compacted properly, causing the foundation to settle unevenly. And that is something to really look out for. Now, I believe the rule of thumb is if the crack is more than 1/4 of an inch, it is a true foundation issue. But ideally, we don't want cracks anywhere near 1/4 of an inch, and we want to raise that to the builder immediately. This is what you want to look out for. You want to look out for large cracks, uneven flooring, signs of water intrusion. I can't stress this enough. A shaky foundation means major repairs down the line. Do not ignore this. Now let's head into the kitchen and the bathrooms. I want you to look at the cabinetry and hardware. A major red flag is cheap cabinetry and hardware. Just because something looks nice doesn't mean it's well constructed. You see, cabinets and hardware are easy pieces for builders to cut corners. So you want to open the doors and drawers, and if they wobble or feel flimsy or use cheap material like particle board, please run. Do not buy that house, because again, those are the corners that they're cutting that you can see. What other corners is that builder and contractors cutting that you can't see? Now, years ago, I had a client buy a budget property. Now, this is what worked in their price point, so I'm not knocking that it was a budget property, but within just a few months, the cabinet started to sag. And why? Because the cheap materials. So, pro tip, you want to look for solid wood or plywood, dovetail joints, and sturdy hinges. Don't settle for less, because just because it looks nice doesn't mean it's going to function in the short term or the long term. You do not want them to cheap out on the cabinets and hardware. Now, the last red flag I want to touch on, well, before I give you the additional bonus ones, is poor drainage around the home. Now, many people overlook this, but water is the silent killer of most homes. You need to check the grading around the property. Water should flow away from the home, not toward it. Poor drainage can cause flooded basements, and if you're in the Carolinas, there's not many basements, but it can cause water intrusion and sinking soil and cracked driveways, and it can cause the foundation to shift. You want to look for downspouts and gutters that are properly sloped and sloped away from the home. And if water is puddling near the home, that is a major red flag. Now, the rule of thumb is after a rain or after some kind of water instance, if the puddling is still there 48 hours after the last rain, then yes, that is a serious issue that needs to be addressed by the builder immediately. Because you do not want to buy a home with drainage issues, because fixing it after the fact is costly and oftentimes could have been prevented if the builder had graded things properly the first time. Now, here are the final tips on how you, a home buyer, can protect yourself. Now, I know this might feel a little overwhelming, but there's good news. You don't have to do this alone. Here's how you protect yourself. You should hire a new construction specialist, like myself. Now, I joke, but even if you don't hire me, you do need to hire a new construction specialist. If that realtor or real estate agent is not specialized in new home construction and know what to look out for, they're not really doing the best service for you. You see, I know the top builders who prioritize quality, and I will guide you through every step of the process when you buy a home and a new construction home. And if you're building, buying, or investing in North or South Carolina, give me a call, shoot me a text, or email me. I'm here to make sure that you have peace of mind and get a high quality home without all the stress. Trust me, buying a home is a stressful process already. There's no need to add to that stress. And while every time you buy a home, there will be bumps along the road, some of them can be avoided. And we need to hold people accountable and make sure things get done so we can avoid those bumps that we can. I'm Sir Ashley, your real estate advisor. I will talk to you on the next one.